Climate change is a hot topic, literally. It's fashionable to be sustainable, yet it's never sustainable to be fashionable. Business schools and consultants are in love with MBAs and ESGs, but do they even know their ABCs about SDGs and GHGs? Climate change is arguably the one topic I'm at least slightly qualified to talk about. For everything else, I'm pretty much just an opinionated fuck. It's also the one I'm most scared to talk about. Not only is Dunning-Kruger coming into full effect, I believe that climate change is such a threat that I don't want to mess this up. Climate change is somehow political. In reality, there's no somehow about it. The political nature of climate change was a successfully coordinated attempt by the fossil fuel industry to obfuscate and confuse in order to maximize profits. Do you know just how much oil companies fucked us over? In the 1980s, scientists about Exxon and Shell made predictions about how the increased use of fossil fuels was leading to, and would continue to lead to, higher levels of CO2 in the atmosphere, which would cause global temperatures to rise in the 21st century, i.e., global warming. They also predicted the devastating consequences that these temperatures would have on the planet. Their predictions have proven to be very accurate. They fucking knew. Not only did they know and not inform us, they actively spread fear and misinformation whilst designing their infrastructure to be resilient to the rising seas and higher temperatures that they predicted would be experienced in the 21st century. They knew and did worse than nothing. They pumped oil money into advertising campaigns, lobbyists, and corruptible scientists to portray global warming as an unproven and debatable topic. They muddied the water, and I'm not taking cheap shots at oil spills here, I promise, by focusing on the potential lack of accuracy in global warming predictions. They instilled fear in the public by making them think that acting against global warming would interfere with economic growth and prosperity. They even changed the name of the issue itself. Global warming, deemed too frightening, became climate change. The weather changes every day, so why be scared of a changing climate? And now climate change is viewed by some as a belief, akin to religion or Santa Claus. It has become a belief that corresponds to certain political ideologies. To this day, certain Democrats, and let's be real, all Republicans in the United States of America, are being fed an IV drip mixture of dollars and dinosaur to block meaningful changes that could tackle the issue. The public were hoodwinked, the oil barons profited, and the planet became arguably irreparably damaged. They knew what they were doing. They should pay for their crimes. We have a right to be angry. They will be long dead whilst we deal with the consequences. Pause, rewind. What is climate change? What are its causes? Anthropogenic, i.e., related to humans, climate change is the rise in global temperatures caused by the increase in the levels of greenhouse gases in the Earth's atmosphere. The increase in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is a direct result of human activity. A greenhouse gas is any gas that traps heat in the Earth's atmosphere, contributing to the so-called greenhouse effect. When the proportion of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere rises, the amount of trapped heat that would otherwise have radiated out into space also rises. There are four main types of greenhouse gas: carbon dioxide, methane, water vapor, and nitrous oxide. Simple. The four largest greenhouse gas emitting sectors are construction, transportation, electricity generation, agriculture. To prevent further climate change, these four sectors must be addressed. There you are, the ABCs about GHGs. So simple. Why is climate change concerning? Well, it has many effects. The ones you already know are rises in both temperatures and sea levels. And its effects are already being seen. They're not some spectre in the distance. These include more extreme weather and natural disasters. Storms have become more intense and frequent in some parts of the world, droughts in others. We've also witnessed the heightened risk posed by forest fires. Not only are these primary effects scary in and of themselves, they will lead to severe secondary effects. The most concerning is food scarcity and famine due to droughts and water shortages. We will see mass climate migration as a result. We will also see the mass extinction of animals ill-suited to their new climate, though this will happen much more slowly than people think. We will never see it happen. Most frightening, there is a risk of a cascading effect wherein once a tipping point is reached, all hell breaks loose. This could be the mass release of methane from the melting permafrost in the tundra. It could be the collapse of the Gulf Stream. It could be a loss of polar ice caps leading to less heat being reflected outwards towards space. It could be the release of CO2 from oceans due to rising temperatures. They are hard to predict exactly, but the risk exists nonetheless. Whilst these all may seem hard to wrap your head around, remember this. The effects of climate change have already begun to be noticed and will continue to worsen unless, and potentially even if, we address them. In response, many governments have set targets surrounding their greenhouse gas (GHGs) emissions. These are usually discussed at the biannual COP meetings, following guidance from IPCC reports. Wow, technical. These include reaching zero emissions by 2050 or 60, and interim targets for the meantime. These commitments have been made to ensure that average temperature increases are limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius, or has it now hopefully become under 2 degrees Celsius in comparison to pre-industrial levels? There are many things wrong with these commitments as they currently exist. The sentiment is nice, I guess, but there's no plan to actually hit them, and they ignore key areas of emissions completely. Too little, too late. Solving climate change is hard, in part because it is driven by locked in behaviours. Our every action drips with oil. Lots of people think the solution is doing the small things, like turning off the lights. As Professor David J.C. Mackay always said, if everyone does a little, we'll only achieve a little. And on the topic of Professor Mackay, go read his book, Sustainable Energy Without the Hot Air. Being the legend he was, it's free to download on his website. If we want to stop climate change, we must do big things. And when you consider the importance of the four main sources of GHGs, transport, food, construction, and electricity generation, to our daily lives, you start to understand just how difficult decarbonisation is. Zero emissions means no flying, no shipping, no eating ruminant meats, cows, dairy products, sheep, no concrete, and no steel, as none of these things can be decarbonised. You can argue that they can be decarbonised. In theory, yes. In practice, for the near future, you are wrong. What becomes of the world without these key ingredients? Did I mention that when calculating total emissions, including their targets, countries ignore international flying and shipping because they happen outside of any one country's jurisdiction? How convenient. Especially when you realise both have huge carbon footprints and both cannot be decarbonised. How convenient indeed. It'll make the achievement of targets easier, at least. Yay. Governments have put forward proposals outlining how they will reach zero emissions, as have organisations and scientists. In general, two distinct streams exist when it comes to tackling climate change: the optimists and the pessimists. Governments rely heavily on unfounded optimism in their proposals. Some groups have a rather more pessimistic approach to the issue. I shall deal with each in turn. The optimistic approach to tackling climate change is basically a continuation of the status quo. The market will sing, dance, and magically solve all of our problems. We won't have to address our behavioural issues, and the rich can keep getting richer and richer and richer and richer and richer. A fundamental right, you know. The optimists believe that we will see great market-led innovation that will result in a decarbonisation that is as equally massive as it is swift. When optimists design proposals, much is left blank or filled with guesses, as no one can predict the future state of technology. For example, current optimistic decarbonisation pathways rely heavily on great strides being made in the domains of carbon sequestration and hydrogen. In doing this, they might as well hope for miracles in nuclear fusion, as there are major flaws with carbon sequestration and hydrogen, which I will discuss in a future episode. For the optimistic approach to conceivably work, if we want to achieve our 2050 emission goals, we will have to solve fusion now. Given how long it takes to build conventional fission reactors, as well as their cost, we arguably don't even have enough time to deploy nuclear fusion on a massive scale, even if it did magically start working. In reality, the optimists are foolish gamblers who are risking quite a lot to ensure the stability of short-term profit margins. They're risking our future. And then there are the pessimists. These include the aforementioned Professor Mackay and continue to include Professor Julian Allwood and his research group. I call them pessimists because they're pessimistic about the chances of heroic technological innovations rescuing us. In all fairness, they're better labelled as realists. Sustainable Energy Without the Hot Air is the realist Bible. Again, if you are interested in climate change, please go read it. Julian Allwood has continued Professor Mackay's work, and his team have published what I will call the Realist Manifesto, Absolute Zero. It is also a must-read, and importantly free. In short, the realistic viewpoint identifies key actions that can be made using today's technology to achieve absolute zero emissions in the UK by 2050. It's important to note that the absolute zero emission criterion differs from net zero emissions as it doesn't allow for the use of unproven carbon sequestration technology that would allow greenhouse gas emissions to be offset. Absolute zero's teachings can be applied easily to any developed nation. Put simply, we must scale renewable energy as quickly as possible, whilst also phasing out fossil fuels at the same pace. We must electrify all things that can be electrified, i.e., transport like trains and cars, as well as the heating and cooling of buildings. Importantly, we must use less than we currently do, as we will not immediately have unlimited clean electricity at our disposal in a zero carbon world. We must eat less meat and no cow or sheep products. We also mustn't fly. The world, following these rules, will be a very different place. And I myself am not very good at following them. Finally, there is one major question that the pessimists cannot answer that the optimists can. Is it even possible for the global south to continue to develop and see improvements in quality of life without having a carbon bloom? It is easiest for the developed world to transition because we have already accrued so much wealth and infrastructure with the help of historic greenhouse emissions. No one has yet to lay out a feasible plan that couples improving living standards with achieving zero emissions in the developing world. As no nation has ever leapfrogged the Industrial Revolution with success, we owe the citizens of the Global South the necessary resources to ensure just transition. In the end, no matter what we do, those citizens who will face and are currently facing the worst impacts of climate change will be the ones least able to mitigate against it.